Folks, thanks a lot for the 70,000 subscribers. You guys are awesome. But we're not stopping here. Let's push it, folks, to 100,000 subscribers. So give that support to the channel and subscribe, and hit that like button down below to reach our goal of 153 likes. And now let's go for it. The story begins with a severely wounded commoner opening his eyes, delivered into the hands of his enemies who laugh around him with disdain for his humiliation. The foe in front, before ending the man's life, grants him the opportunity to cast one last spell. The injured man struggles to seize the chance, but all he manages is to invoke a weak magic that dissipates before reaching the target. Faced with this, the enemy recites a phrase from the father of magic, William Bordeaux. The most important thing for a mage is their lineage, talent, and effort. Then he adds that a commoner like him could never become a mage through effort alone, as he lacks talent and lineage, and finally casts a fire spell that sets the commoner ablaze. However, instead of screaming in despair, the commoner is enchanted by the fantastic magic that talented noble just cast, and even though the flames are painful, he sees beauty in it and would love to learn to do the same. Thus, while he admires the spell around him, the fire turns his body into ashes and takes his life away. Next, a baby awakens before several servants, with the consciousness of the commoner who had just died. Not knowing where he is or who those people are, he thinks to defend himself with a fireball, believing them to be giants. Then, moving his tiny hands, he invokes a magic that explodes inside the tower where he is. In the surroundings of the castle, the population celebrates the birth of the 7th prince of the Saloum Kingdom, named Lloyd, who on his first day of life already leaves the servants in awe with his strange talent. Several years later, the kingdom of Saloum seems at peace and anticipating the growth of the new leader of the nation, while inside the castle, the servants search for the young prince among the enormous corridors. However, the boy manages to evade the servants and tries to run away, until he encounters 2 men on the way and asks them not to tell the maids where he is. The men accept the request and invite young Lloyd to go hunting, since that is a worthy pastime for royalty, but the child only wants to play hide and seek. One of the men questions whether it's worth focusing so much on a boy who's out of the fight for the throne, but the more experienced man reminds that Lloyd started speaking within a few days of birth, has always been reading magic books instead of coloring books, refused breast milk as a form of chivalry, and furthermore, the man believes Lloyd to be the reincarnation of William Bordeaux, the father of magic. Meanwhile, Lloyd himself agrees that he reincarnated, but points out that in his past life, he was just an ordinary guy from the city of Salome. He has no idea why he still has his old memories or why he was reborn as a noble of the royal family, since he never cared about titles and glories. Since his past life, his true obsession was to explore and study magic. And at least this giant palace can provide all the knowledge he ever wanted and more, unlike the old Saloum Magic Academy. However, as he was about to resume his beloved studies, a servant named Silpha pulled the boy into his combat training. Once in action, Lloyd demonstrates great talent with a wooden sword, but doesn't understand why the 7th prince, with no chance of ascending the throne, really needs this training. Silpha reminds him that succession isn't everything, and that a member of royalty must know how to handle a weapon. Since she was entrusted with the boy's education 3 years ago, Silpha does what she can to develop the prince in the best way possible, so she takes her work very seriously. With that said, Lloyd realizes that slacking off will only make the lesson last longer, so he returns to the duel with a cheat to end the fight quickly and go back to reading. This cheat is a control magic to mimic all of the teacher's movements, making it seem like she's fighting against a mirror. However, as the woman is taller and stronger, copying the movements from a disadvantaged position is of no use, so Lloyd goes further in his cheat and casts a biological growth along with a physical enhancement, as well as levitation that puts him on equal footing with a rival. With this, Lloyd covers the differences he had and believes that this way he can win the fight, so he uses a trick up his sleeve to finally hit Silpha. Considering that he has been acting like a mirror for a long time, the girl is sure that all the opponent's movements will be imitations, so Lloyd improvises a different counterattack to surprise her. Then he advances swiftly behind the girl and strikes, but besides defending the attack, Silpha denounces that the boy is cheating and hits him with the sword hilt on the ear. Soon, she explains that the boy made the sword grow to gain more reach and levitated during the duel to match the height. However, instead of scolding Lloyd or giving him a punishment, she praises him for managing to cast 2 spells at the same time, something even the court wizards have difficulty doing. Spinning him in the air like a stuffed animal, she asks the young man not to rush too much to evolve, while Lloyd reflects that he was actually using 4 spells at the same time, but prefers to keep quiet about it. In addition to keeping silent about his real power, Lloyd sneaks through the palace at night to check if a rumor he had always heard about a forbidden library in the basement is true. Using an invisibility spell, he approaches a guard who confirms the existence of this library while warning his companion not to let his guard down, as in this forbidden place there is a magic that could shake the kingdom, as well as a dangerous demon that was sealed inside. Excited with the information, Lloyd descends the stairs while a guard assures that no bandit is capable of breaking their security, and even if they do, 10 mages use their strongest magic to seal the entrance, creating an unbreakable barrier. With that said, Lloyd destroys the seal as if it were nothing, and is amazed to have lived 10 years in that place without knowing that there was such an incredible hidden section. Without a second thought, he explores the library like a child in an amusement park, planning to reconstruct the entrance seal when he leaves until a strange creature emerges from within a book and is impressed by a kid finally breaking through the magical barrier. The monster introduces himself as Grimoire, the demon of the forbidden book, while Lloyd responds with his name as well. The demon wishes for the boy to break his seal, but Lloyd ponders if that's the right thing to do. Grimoire points out that his seal is bound to break any moment now due to its age, and furthermore, he can reward the child with however much gold he desires. However, Lloyd approaches one of those supposed gold coins and discovers it's a low-level creation magic, leaving the demon incredulous that he's been unmasked by a child. Moreover, Lloyd corners the creature and asserts that he will actually put its seal back, as his study of magic is based on the libraries of this realm, and letting a demon loose could jeopardize everything. Grimoire argues that the guys who sealed him were from centuries past, and therefore he harbors no grudge against anyone in the present, but the kid isn't buying it. So Grimoire promises to teach him about ancient magics from hundreds of years ago, and thus he captures the young one's attention. With that, Grimoire assumes a more innocent form and praises the child, stating he has great talent for magic, though this triggers Lloyd's past life memory, where the mysterious mage claimed he had no talent or lineage. Still, Lloyd agrees with Grimoire and even adds that he has a much more privileged background than commoners, making the demon pretend to agree while internally wanting to bury his face in the ground. Soon the seventh prince breaks the seal of the demon from the forbidden book, who can't believe the kid fell for such a silly trick. Then Lloyd asks when they will start the lessons on ancient magic, and Grimoire casts the dark shot spell on him, asking if he had time to learn. Convinced the kid had met his end, Grimoire wonders what to do next. However, Lloyd emerges unscathed with a magical shield around him, impressed by the exotic design of the spell cast. Innocently, he asks if the demon could teach another power besides that, but Grimoire is inclined to end the game, so he casts several dark shots at the magical shield, yet none of them damage the barrier. Seeing the spells exploding on the barrier, Lloyd can't contain his curiosity and brings a piece inside to observe and try to learn how it works. The boy's finger turns raw with mana density, but he licks the scraped finger as if it were cotton candy and asks the demon to send the next lesson. Grimoire goes wild and assumes a transformation that allows him to conjure the spiral dark shot. When the magic hits the barrier, Lloyd takes the opportunity to analyze that the fusion of two enchantments is a special type of magic that only two-mouthed demons can cast, as if it were a more advanced stage of the normal dark shot. Despite admiring the spell, he wasn't even able to scratch Lloyd's magical shield, and with that, Grimoire simply can't believe his most powerful magic is useless against this barrier. Lloyd ignores the demon's frustration and comments that he must have been very excited to learn that spell, memorizing the formula and controlling the mana flow as if it were the most fun thing in the world. At this point, Grimoire doesn't even know how to react to this crazy kid anymore, so he tries to flee out of fear of the worst happening. However, Lloyd had extended his barrier to the limits of the library to protect the entrance to the castle, so the demon loses his last card and at least tries to convince the child he wasn't trying to escape. Lloyd believes the demon's word and explains that actually he did something so dangerous in the past that since then, he decided to take precautions and isolate the environments where things could get heated. Grimoire loses patience again with this story and threatens the prince again, but Lloyd isn't up for defending against another dark shot. This time he wants to see an ancient defensive magic, and so he summons the impetuous fireball for the demon to defend against. Despite the boy's good intention, Grimoire almost turns into roasted goat in the entirely devastated library, and Lloyd asks why he didn't defend himself. Next, the prince uses his magic to restore the entire place from the total ruin his fireball caused, and all Grimoire wants to know is who this snotty kid really is. The demon sucks up to the child to clean his slate, and Lloyd returns the compliments innocently. Then Lloyd points out that demons cannot die through magic, but he would love to test how far one of them can endure. With that, Grimoire backs off for good and swears loyalty to the kid, offering himself as a familiar. Lloyd accepts the proposal, but as the demon attracts too much attention with his demon dog carcass, he transforms into a mini-demon to win Lloyd over with cuteness, since he couldn't in the exchange. The boy asks the demon to get inside his clothes, and Grimoire sees this as a chance to cling to his body and control his mind, but the boy's mana was so insane that the demon knew touching a finger to that grotesque mass was signing his own death warrant, so he backs off and decides to be nice for now, asking Lloyd to call him Grim. With everything settled, the seventh prince can finally return to reading his books in peace. Sometime later, inside the castle, the Saloon Kingdom, a member of the royal family is carefully groomed by his servants, and clad in his royal attire, he strides through one of the mansion's halls past his bowing attendants until he enters the library, where Lloyd was engrossed in his numerous books on magic. Grim asks what to do in the presence of such a stranger, so the little boy asks him to hide. Soon, upon seeing who it was, Lloyd becomes excited at Albert's arrival. Together, they head down to the training field, and Albert showcases his new magic skills, hitting a target dead-on with his fire spell, leaving everyone around impressed with the lad's accuracy. While Lloyd applauds the performance, Grim asks if this is indeed the second prince, and Lloyd confirms it, adding that he has a great physique and is very intelligent to the point where they say he'll be the next king of Salem. Albert has authority to access all the castle's facilities, and sometimes invites Lloyd to explore the surroundings with him. As it's one of the rare opportunities to do magic in the castle, the boy is grateful for the invitations, like this one, for example. Soon it's Lloyd's turn to showcase his magic skills, but as he doesn't want to draw attention to the point of being dragged into the succession to the throne, he thinks about purposefully curving the fireball to just graze the target, making everyone think he lacks talent. Sure enough, the seventh prince casts a spell for each target, and in all of them, the result is the same, never hitting the targets head-on. In response, people applaud, but a nobleman scoffs at the fact that the child can only manage to graze them all, while Grim wonders if the man knows how difficult it is to do all that on purpose. Next, Lloyd decides to add rotation to the fireballs, saving mana and making the trajectory more stable. However, before the presentation, Albert bids farewell to his brother for a short break, but everyone present leaves with the second prince. Instead of being offended, Lloyd celebrates having the shooting gallery all to himself because he's eager to test his new powers, like the double enchantment trick he learned from the Grimoire. Grim warns that this technique is exclusive to demons because if a human messes with it, they might end up getting a second mouth for free. In this case, seemingly casually, Lloyd absorbs Grim into his body and manifests him in his own hand, leaving the demon outraged. Nevertheless, Lloyd asks him to cast the impetuous fireball, and the goat boasts since advanced magic is a piece of cake for him. However, a whirlwind of random spells mixes in the body shared by the two, and after a carnival of auditory and visual hallucinations, Grim seems to have returned from a trip. Reflecting on what happened, Lloyd remembers that they've just experienced a spell stack, which is a technique of mixing enchantments from various spells to reduce their activation time. Apparently, the boy was invoking 100 spells at the same time, and this caused a combustion. With this, Grim freaks out and comments that it's right to use 2 or 3 at most, but the child thinks that the invocation will still be too slow. To correct this problem, Lloyd borrows the demon's mouth to recite 2 advanced enchantments at once, controlling his speech. Then merging the impetuous fireball with the impetuous cascade ball, a surreal increase in mana envelops Lloyd, and Grim can't believe that the young man is capable of combining 2 such different spells. With the double enchantment prepared, Lloyd knows he can't release a spell of this level on the surface, so he points the energy buildup upward, displaying a magical wave so vast and powerful that it could be seen from every corner of the kingdom. Meanwhile, inside the palace, a nobleman asks why Albert pays so much attention to Lloyd, since he's just a child with little talent for magic and nothing more. In response, Albert asserts that the man has no clue about talent, thinking like that. After all, Lloyd hit all the targets in the same way, and it's quite possible that he did it on purpose. In Albert's opinion, the seventh prince is a prodigy, possibly even becoming a great sage one day, and at the same time an important asset for Albert. The nobleman remarks that the future king can and should make use of the services of the great sage, but Albert laughs and replies that his only intention is to get along with his little brother. At that moment, the man observes through the window the darkened sky and wonders if the sun has already set. But according to the astonished Grim, his master opened a hole in the sky that crossed the morning and exposed the bright night underneath the covers. But soon the boy backs off with this insane magic and interrupts the phenomenon, while Grim wonders who the heck this child is after all. In the next scene, we are treated to a bonus anime animation showing a battered Lloyd being tended to by Grim, who has no idea why he's acting like this brat's nanny. On the other hand, the healthier Grim can keep the child, the healthier the body he will possess once he gets the chance. Keeping this in mind, the demon wipes the snot from the runny-nosed boy as he awaits the future where he will be free again. With the end of the bonus scene, the little flying goat finds an article in a newspaper talking about a mysterious hole in the sky, but when he shows it to Lloyd that his spell became famous, The young human seems more interested in the back of the newspaper, where another article announced a group of Ranka adventurers who cleared a powerful dungeon and collected all the precious treasures. This article gives the boy the idea to explore dungeons himself, hoping to get a bunch of items with magical powers. Grimm argues that the royal family will freak out when they can't find the seventh prince within the kingdom's domains, so Lloyd solves the problem by creating a wooden replica of himself, perfectly identical both in appearance and in the resin that imitates bones and skin, with the roots functioning as the circulatory system. The copy is so good that Grimm claims Lloyd will be able to leave very calmly, but the boy responds that if it were that easy, he would have done it before. According to him, the real problem is Sylph, who, on another day, for example, entered Lloyd's room and commented that he had grown 0.07 millimeters in the last few days. For this reason, the boy doubts that he would fool that woman with a doll that only knows how to dance like a fool, but fortunately, he has another card up his sleeve. Soon, he was already flying over the skies of Salum towards his adventure, while communicating with his replica through Grimm, who possessed Lloyd's copy while talking to him through the boy's hand. The maids around observe the wooden doll and comment that the prince is very vain, and that is the cutest thing in the world for them. Meanwhile, Grimm is trying to maintain posture after having put his mind in the replica and the body in Lloyd's hand. Then the master asks the servant to be alert with Sylph and sets off on the journey while Grimm takes advantage of the master's absence in his fake body with mana to bring discord to humanity. However, at this moment, Lloyd says he is very happy to have Grimm as a familiar and affirms that he relies on him for everything. Faced with this, the demon sheds some tears, but soon pretends to be brave again so as not to convey an image he doesn't want. Meanwhile, Lloyd has no idea where to find a dungeon, so he stops to think for a moment, until a girl appears in the forest fleeing from several orcs. After running from them for a while, she turns against them and strikes each one with such force that the creature's eyes pop out. Finally, the woman invokes a magic that destroys the monsters into pieces, while her cape appears with the word warrior. Grimm thinks she's one of those martial artists, and Lloyd loved the way she breathes because she channels an energy called Kai through their bodies by breathing, which allows the use of incredible techniques. At this point, the warrior tells the hidden boy to show his face, and Lloyd sees this as an opportunity to learn more about this breathing. But Grimm fears she will find out that the boy is a prince of Salum. Lloyd agrees and remains hidden, so the girl identifies him as an enemy and prepares to face him. However, the wizard had disguised himself as a novice adventurer named Robert, and since this transformation spell could only make him become who he already knows, Lloyd used the double enchantment and mixed his appearance with that of his brother Albert, and by combining the two, the boy created an original form. Feeling unthreatened, the girl introduces herself as Tao, a rank B adventurer as well as a martial artist. Lloyd is worried that she might suspect something, but instead, she is simply in love with this new appearance of Lloyd Salum. After 18 years dedicated to training, Tao even met some boys along the way, but they only had eyes for delicate and finicky priestesses, so she promises to make Robert her boyfriend whatever it takes. Lloyd is confused by the girl's behavior and says goodbye, but Tao asks to join the young man, so they go to the entrance of a dungeon in the forest. Beating everyone up, Tao asks if Robert fell in love with her strength, but the guy only has eyes for the shiny stones in the cave. A little further ahead, Lloyd asks if Tao ventures alone, and the girl replies yes, since she never found any decent men, or rather, adventure companions to share the journey. Sometime later during a meal, Lloyd wants to know about this Kai that the girl used to make those attacks, and Tao is impressed that someone from this continent knows this rare technique. Lloyd explains that Kai is somewhat like how mana works in magic, because the way you breathe is also important for the traditional technique. Then she teaches that Ki begins and ends with breathing, which you use to control Ki, allowing you to gain explosive power beyond normal capacity. Even to feel the Ki, it is necessary to practice breathing a lot. But speaking of Ki, Tao flirts that it's much easier to feel what she wants with Robert, but at this point the boy was trying to imitate the breath to feel this manifestation in him. After failing, Tao scolds the boy because he risked burning his lungs since he is not accustomed to this technique. Despite everything, Lloyd managed to feel this vibration inside him, a separate energy from mana within his body, and is moved to have experienced such a beautiful moment of magic. Seeing the boy's dedication to this goal, Tao promises to teach him more about this technique, so she asks him to practice maintaining that breath until they leave the dungeon. Meanwhile, Grimm is enjoying his day as the boss, not understanding how that brat doesn't care about all this comfort and only keeps his face buried in magic books all day. At this moment, Sylph approaches and Grimm already knows this is going to be trouble. Meanwhile, Tao showed the Real Prince the power of the Kai Burst she used to defeat the boss of this dungeon, the Grey Wolf, on the first try. With that, they can now open the treasure chest, But the girl warns that such a weak dungeon shouldn't give any decent items. Seeing his companion fascinated by the mechanics of the chest, Tao comments that he seems more interested in the chest itself than in what's inside it, and shortly after notices that he has maintained the key breath until now, and therefore begins to consider that indeed this man might be a catch, and who knows, even her annoying grandfather might approve of this engagement. However, her beloved Robert only has eyes for the treasure chest, but when he opens it, a trap is activated and almost cuts the adventurers in half. After that, a lich emerges from under the chest and floats in front of the two. Despite the scary appearance, Lloyd seems innocently interested in the monster, wanting to know if it's another boss of this dungeon. Lloyd asks what kind of creature that is, but Tao brushes it off and asks the boy to wait outside. Faced with his reluctance to leave, she forces him through a technique to be alone in the battle against this powerful enemy. At that moment, Tao is attacked by the lich, and even though she regrets treating Robert that way, the enemy's blows show it's better than the boy dying there. Tao even breaks the lich's magic, but she has no idea why such a strong monster is in such a low-level dungeon, where even A-rank adventurers have difficulty with it. Meanwhile, Lloyd stands with his arms crossed, frustrated for not learning more about Kai. So he summons a shield that plows through the monsters in front until he manages to break free from Tao's technique. Still, he's unsure whether to return or not, so he asks Grimm's opinion. However, the demon is seriously weakened and can only ask the master to return. In the meantime, Tao continues to stand against the enemy, but she knows she can't win this fight, and this is her end. But since she sent her dear Robert out there, maybe she can slip away from that place. However, the lich comments on the human's chi techniques, saying he's eaten someone who mastered that art, which is nothing more than an inferior form of magic. Now it's Tao's turn to be devoured by the monster and have her abilities stolen, but according to him, it would only be worth eating that boy who reacted to his initial attack. In response, Tao comments that Robert and the lich are alike in always seeking knowledge, but unlike the monster, the boy is capable of finding what he's looking for even under a rock, not inside a person's stomach. She knows that the people of the continent treat Ki as an outdated technique from the countryside, but Robert said he found it amazing. Then the lich asks what that has to do with anything, until Tao uses her breath to strike the enemy, but he protects himself with a magical shield. Still, the girl has been training since she was 5 years old to strike with force, even depriving her of doing normal things like getting a boyfriend, so at least she has to use all that sacrifice to cause damage in a fight like this. True to her word, she shatters the shield with a punch, then applies a technique that penetrates the barrier as if it were an eggshell. However, this power has consumed almost all of the fighter's energy, and now she can barely move. Without having suffered a scratch, the lich reappears and says that even the girl's most powerful K technique is weaker than a simple magic he can do with just one finger. Finally, he declares that the young woman wasted her life in vain, then applies the Mortisishra ability on Tao to end the fight. Despite this, Lloyd was there with his magical shield to prevent his friend from dying. Serene, as always, the kid says he'll have to be quick because he's in a hurry, then challenges the lich to play. Tao looks scared at that boy she thought was so different, while the lich finds amusement in that arrogance and prepares a spell to confirm his superiority, but Lloyd is extremely fast and reaches the enemy's back, invoking with his lungs the disbearer magic of the air type even without enchantment. The lich attacks again, but Lloyd is comfortable inside his shield, reflecting on the combination of ki and mana. Soon, thinking about Tao's teachings, he focuses his breath to bring more air to his lungs and accelerate the magic. With this, the shield becomes unstable and travels through the cave, making the monster think the human wants to escape, but the boy is struggling to gather more and more air. The barrier continued to withstand the creature's continuous attacks, but Lloyd ends up having to dispel it to use the external air. Seeing the exposed target, the lich sings victory and unleashes the ultimate spell, but the human begins to dodge the onslaughts to breathe in more oxygen and channel as much ki as possible. Thus, he shapes his mana along with the ki, and begins to form a magic that becomes a disc in his hand. This disc circulates around his body to protect the user from magical threats, but according to Lloyd, the spell didn't take the form he wanted. So this time he produces 2 thinner discs for them to reach the lich, who uses Mortisishra to protect himself. The monster's defense manages to block some discs, but Lloyd throws new spells so fast that the enemy doesn't have time to react. Faced with this situation, the lich swallows his own arrogance at seeing a Kai technique defeating his spells until Lloyd prepares his thinnest and sharpest energy disc so far. The lich protects himself once again with his magical shield, but the disc cuts through the barrier along with its summoner in a perfect strike, finally throwing the lich back into the depths of darkness. Tao can't believe what she's seeing, while the boy seems to have enjoyed this training. Afterward, they finally go after the well-deserved loot, but they see it was a waste of time because there was only an old rusty knife inside the chest. However, Lloyd notices that it's imbued with magic and asks to keep the weapon, until the chest is pulled down into the earth, causing the cave to start collapsing. Thus, Lloyd realizes that the treasure is the core that sustains each dungeon, and evaluating the mechanism that feeds all these dungeons, the kid gets excited as the cave is coming down, which makes Tao more and more desperate. Finally, he grabs the chest he wanted so much, and they both get out of there. Upon leaving, Lloyd analyzes that the chest would be responsible for gathering forces underground to give life to the dungeon once again. Intrigued, Tao asks if the boy used Kai instead of magic just because the Lich disdained the technique, but in fact the boy just thought it would be more fun. At that moment, he remembers something and flies quickly upwards, but before he goes, Tao promises that she'll strive until she can use the final technique that the boy used, the Key Blade. Finally, Lloyd replies that whether it's magic or Kai, the important thing is always to be progressing before departing. As for Tao, she really intends to progress, especially to become attractive to Robert, and that's why she freaks out when she remembers she didn't get his contact. At the end of the return trip, Lloyd arrives desperate behind Grim, and the demon had 4 roosters on his head given by Silpha during daily training. On that occasion, the kid was shaking a lot, leaving the teacher puzzled by this strange behavior, so she decides to be tougher with the student because he suddenly became weak. After that, Grim just cried like a child while waiting for his master's return. After that, in the extra animation of the episode, Lloyd stuffed everything he could and then summoned to his magic bag, and Tao wondered what kind of black hole was inside there, but Lloyd teaches that he uses the field expansion magic to freely increase the space of any bag or sack. Arriving home, the boy empties the bag full of rubble and garbage because the dungeon collapsed and destroyed most of the items. With the remaining item in hand, Grim questions if Lloyd spent all this time to bring back an old knife, but the boy asks his friend not to get rid of the item because an old knife is what makes good magic. Right after putting the weapon in hot water and scraping the surface, the mana essence was coming out cracking, a catalyst that elevates imbued magical formulas to incredible levels. In the case of this knife, it seems to have been enchanted with strengthening power. Then he shakes all the essence into a container to break the formula, but he is careful not to waste this material, as it's not something you find on every corner. Therefore, Lloyd analyzes the mana essence to be able to create more on his own and uses the water purification ability to filter impurities and separate the base elements, which are oil, silver, and hematite. Grim comments that hematite is made from monster core powder, but Lloyd thinks he can make a workaround with the dungeon core. Now he's just missing oil, silver, and a bunch of weapons. So the playboy goes to his father and asks for that cool contribution. The old man asks if it wouldn't be better to give it in gold, but Lloyd really needs silver, and the king is delighted with his boy's humility. So with the material in hand, the human and the demon gather in a secluded and dark room to get down to business. The next day, things started to return to normal, and Silpha was recognizing her apprentice again in sword fighting. When using the sprint, Lloyd runs under the girl's skirt, but she's faster than that and dodges the attack. Then he summons a magic that impresses the tutor, but it only served as cover for Silpha to hide and end the fight with another victory on her account. After training, Lloyd doesn't think it's fair to win the oil, since the deal was to get the substance if he hit the teacher once, but just seeing that the boy is no longer yesterday's scaredy cat, Silpha is already satisfied with today's training. Watching from the sidelines, Grim is upset that he didn't beat the maid, while she reflects that Lloyd could be the leader of the knights when he grows up, since he's mastering both swordplay and magic. So the boy says goodbye and returns with the oil in hand. Now only the weapons were missing to complete the formula, so Lloyd goes to his brother Albert to sort this out. Albert thought the youngest would ask for candy or a Hot Wheels track, but is happy to see the child's love for magic. So he asks his guards who wants to have their weapons strengthened by his little brother. Everyone hands over the equipment to demonstrate loyalty, but the soldiers are crying for fear of losing their sword to a 10-year-old playing enchantment. In the meantime, once again, Grim keeps an eye behind the scenes. With everything in hand, Lloyd activates the automatic assistant on his clone, while the demon motivates the group to create the strongest weapons in the kingdom. Therefore, Lloyd appeals by drawing 3 layers of enchantment on a single sword, in addition to applying elasticity enhancement and several other formulas wherever there's a little space left. However, the seal can't handle so much magic and ends up bursting the sword, so the young mage tries to go easier to not throw the whole formula in the trash. In this back and forth of swords, Lloyd was spending one after another until he managed to enhance 50 out of 120. Upon returning to Albert, he regrets breaking 70, but in fact he had managed 80, only he broke 10 more trying to cram a lot of magic into them. Analyzing the armaments, Albert recalls that the success rate of a first-rate enchanter is only 10%, so his brother did an unbelievable job. Suddenly, he notices one particular sword among the others, while his soldiers planned to pretend that their swords got better by not believing that the enchantment worked, until one of their swords cut the scabbard in half when sheathed. At that moment, Albert draws his treasure and Lloyd is eager to see his creations in action, so the second prince calls the youngest to hunt a monster. Hey folks, we're kicking off the new anime season, and if you enjoyed this anime and want to see more of it, go ahead and hit that like button down below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We need your support to reach our goal of 70,000 subscribers. Every subscription counts and helps us grow our community. Catch you next time.